Hello, so today we're talking about perimeter and circumference. So perimeter, we briefly mentioned last time, is the length around the outside of a shape. So for any shape like this, you just gotta work your way around. So we might start with the 8 up the top and make sure you add every side length around the boundary of the shape. And so with this one, we would get 37 meters. This might be even easier. We start with a 10. Remember, these two markings mean that they are the same length, which means that one's also 10. So you've got to add another one. And then you add the 6 on the bottom. And we get 26 centimeters. Something like this, it would look like we might not have enough information because it looks like we don't know any of those little lengths. But you can notice that this 15 along the left there is really the same as these little bits, because if you just move them along, you can see they make up the same size. So that means all of those little blue bits are also 15 millimeters in total. And likewise, if the top edge is 20 millimeters, then all of these guys also make up 20 millimeters. Okay, so all the green little bits make up another 20 millimeters. So in total, we have two 15s and two 20s, which gives us 70 millimeters. Now, we mentioned circles were a bit trickier last time, but we never got around to doing it properly. The perimeter of a circle is called circumference. That only applies to complete circles, so it's just a fancy name for that. To work out its length, we start with a circle which is 1 meter long from one end to the opposite end. Okay, so from one point on the circle to its opposite end, we'll say it's about 1 meter long. Okay, and we take this circle and we unroll it along the number line and see where it ends up. And you see it ends up at 3 and a bit. All right, and that's the number that we called pi. So it's 3.14159, blah, 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 blah. Your calculator has this number, so you can use it in your calculations. Okay, and so what we just saw there was if you have a circle that is 1 meter long from one point to the other side, then its circumference, the length all the way around it, is equal to this pi thing, this 3 and a bit thing. All right. So what if you get a bigger circle? What if it's not just 1 meter long? So if you make the size of the circle something different, well, that blue dashed line from one point to the other end is what we call the diameter of the circle. And so all we have to do is just enlarge that number pi. We just multiply it by the diameter then. Okay, it's just a growth thing. We multiply it by the diameter to enlarge it to match the new circle size. You'll see later that more often than not, we don't actually think about the diameter of the circle. We like to think about the distance from the middle to the edge of the circle, so what I've labeled there in the green. And we call this the radius. We'll see later why, but the radius is more commonly used and is just more useful. So you might see that a way to calculate the circumference is that we can take 2 times pi times the radius. Okay, and the 2's there just because radius from the middle to the edge is half the diameter. So we have to multiply by 2 to make up for that. Okay, so these two are pretty important. You might want to pause this and maybe write that down in your book somewhere. It's pretty important. Okay. All right, a couple of examples of this. So we take a circle with that measurement given. So first thing to think about is whether we're given the radius or the diameter. This one is the length from the middle to the edge. So that's going to be the radius, which means we have to multiply 2 times pi times the radius. Okay, so we type in 2 times pi times 3 into the calculator, and you get about 18.85. Just be careful with your rounding. Okay, what about this one here? It looks much the same, but it's half a circle. it's made up of two parts. Okay, so the perimeter of this kind of shape should be broken up into two bits. You've got the curvy bit along there that I've marked in the blue. Then you've got to add that with the straight bit. Okay, because both of them make up the boundary of the shape. As we said before, we've got to see what kind of measurements we're given. The 10 here is placed along the bottom edge, so this is actually the diameter of the circle this time. Which means if you wanted to work out the circumference of the entire circle, right, it would be pi multiplied by 10 then. Okay. But because we only have half of the circle, we have to then divide that by 2. Okay, and so we get about 15.71. But we're not done yet. We have to add that to the straight bit, which is just 10. That's easy. Okay, and so the final parameter, the total length of the boundary, will be about 15.71 plus 10, which is 25.71. Okay, and so similar ideas should be used for parts of circles. You might see that in your work today. So have a go. If you got troubles, ask your teacher, I guess. And all the best. See you around.